Hello everybody, my name is Jeremy and you're watching The Morgue, where all your base do belong to us. First of all, I want to thank everybody that sent in your music submissions, your nominations for the best MMO music ever. I have had such a good time going through these, listening to all of your different suggestions, and some of them have even made it onto my personal playlist, so that's awesome. I promise to feature these in an upcoming episode. I'm not sure exactly when that episode will take place, so you still have more time to send your submissions in if you haven't already. The best place to do that is actually on the show page where you're probably watching this, if you're not on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, check below for the show notes link. That'll send you to the show page over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Scroll down and leave your comments there. You can also leave them on Jupiter Colony, where there's a really good conversation going there, including some information about the music system in Lord of the Rings Online, which I'm going to cover in that episode as well. But all of that is a future episode. Today's episode was going to be a recap of everything that happened at San Diego Comic-Con. Unfortunately, not a whole lot happened. At least not that many different things. Everybody probably knows at this point. If you're watching this show, I'm sure you're watching the MMO industry in general. There's really only one big news item that came out of San Diego Comic-Con, and that is Star Wars The Old Republic is now available for pre-order. I know. Try to stay in your chair. Now, I have a lot of thoughts to share about this, so I'm going to put it in its own segment. That will be the bulk of today's show. But it's not the only thing, technically, to have come out of San Diego Comic-Con. There's a couple other small stories that I'd like to cover first. Now, I'll be honest, both of these were drastically overshadowed by TOR for good reason, but I think they deserve some commentary nonetheless. First of all, NCSoft was in attendance holding court there on the floor at San Diego Comic-Con. Unfortunately, while many hoped that they were going to be sharing some new information about Guild Wars 2, they really didn't have anything new to show us. I have a feeling most of that new stuff will come out when ArenaNet itself visits PAX Prime later. In the meantime, NCSoft spent most of their time building up hype for the impending metamorphosis of City of Heroes into a free-to-play title, including a brand new trailer and the announcement of a few new power sets that are coming to the game in the near future. And not to be outdone by their superhero-y rival, Sony Online Entertainment finally released their Green Lantern-like power sets in DC Universe Online. Now, I don't have much commentary to share about the power sets themselves. I honestly stopped playing that game a while back, so I haven't experienced them firsthand. But I do have some editorial commentary to share about the announcement and the inclusion of these powers in the game. So before we get into talking about Star Wars The Old Republic, let's first dig into the Green Lantern power sets. Now, in my previous segment, I actually mentioned that Sony Online Entertainment had finally released the Green Lantern power sets, but I double-checked some of my notes during the segment break, and it's not out yet. This was announced back in July 11th, and the only new thing we've gotten since then is a new trailer. Now, this follows a trend, unfortunately, with DCU in general. First of all, this initial announcement came out around the same time as the movie was landing, so that much was coincided, but keep in mind the amount of development time and testing time and internal revisions that go through rolling something out like a brand new power set to a game so that you can make sure it's not upsetting the balance of the existing systems and things like that. Sony must have known that Hardlight or Power Rings were coming soon for maybe as much as a year from this point. And yet, despite all that leeway and all that buildup, they still couldn't manage to release this feature at the same time as the critically panned, but still technically a success, Green Lantern film that came out earlier this summer. This is sadly a trend with DC Universe's development staff. They always miss real-life events. They rolled out a Valentine's Day patch almost an entire month after Valentine's Day was actually here. And their March update, which was themed all around luck, as if having to do with St. Patrick's Day, actually came out right at the end of the month. They keep missing real-life dates, and it's coming across as failed promises. And no fan, not even a super fan, is going to forgive a company forever for broken promises. But themed content is not this game's sole failing point at this point, nor the sole failing point of this particular announcement for the new Power Ring feature. You see, with this announcement, Sony has broken a very important promise and gone back on their word that the content releases for this game would be just like any other MMO and be released free, due to it being a subscription-based game. Well, not so with the Green Lantern Power Ring sets. These are going to cost you. They've called it a mini expansion, but everybody on the communities is already calling it a DLC. Yes, a DLC for an MMO. Are you kidding me? You think you can get away with this? What are the subscription fees going for if not continuing the development of the title that you're buying in for? Having the opportunity to play with the Power Ring set is going to cost you $10. I know it's not going to break the bank. The crux of the matter here is that the fact that Sony previously had told players two different things. One is that this particular power set would be included in the game at the time of launch, and then it got pulled late in the development process. And two, that they would never have to pay for new content. And now they are. I really can't even put into words the amount of fail this is. It just goes onto the pile of what Sony continues to prove itself as. And every time a new game comes out, I keep hoping that they will turn things around, that they'll prove to us that they can treat other games as well as they treat their EverQuest properties. But no, once more, they disappoint. I guess we've still got PlanetSide Next to look forward to, right? I'm sorry, I'm trying very hard not to roll my eyes when I say that. I really am. The biggest MMO gaming news to have occurred over the San Diego Comic-Con weekend is, without a doubt, the announcement and availability of Star Wars The Old Republic's pre-orders, and the resulting meltdown of the community that occurred in the day or two following that announcement. In this segment, I'll be walking you a little bit through what actually happened during that, in case you weren't following it and you want to be caught up to speed on why everybody all of a sudden gnashed their teeth and cried a little. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I also have some of my own editorial to share about each step along the way, and about the game's future in general. The first thing I want to talk about is that when these pre-orders were finally announced, this is the first time that we had gotten a glimpse of the actual price tag associated with the collector's edition version of the game, which I had shown shots of on last week's episode of the Morgue. And it came in at a whopping $150. Now, considering that collector's edition of MMOs up to this point typically have a price tag between about the $80 and $100 range, this was a very significant increase in the total financial investment that BioWare was asking their gamers to buy into. I have heard people say that you could take the figurine that's included in the collector's edition and auction it off on eBay to make a portion of your money back, but let's face it, the kind of person that's going to buy the collector's edition is going to love that figurine. They will keep it, and they will display it proudly. Probably even put pictures of it on Facebook. So that point, unfortunately, is moot. But so too was the cost of the box, it turns out, because within just a matter of hours of becoming available to the public, the collector's edition had sold out on every retailer across the entire planet. Now, later on that day, BioWare actually mentioned in a Q&A that they were not actually sold out, but retailers were saying a different tune. And if you can't get a retailer to let you buy the game, it doesn't matter whether it's sold out or not. Now, a part of me thinks that this limited supply of the game was actually done on purpose. And the fact that BioWare was saying at their Q&A that they were not sold out also leads me to believe that it was a choice made by EA. Now, what I mean by doing this on purpose is that limiting your supply when you have a demand that is so very, very high drives up the cost. Now, you're not actually dealing with a cost in this situation, but you are dealing with an emotional attachment level. And by convincing the Star Wars fans and MMO fans out there that they might have to act even faster to get a copy of their game pre-ordered that they might otherwise have waited weeks for, it was a roll of the dice that this may have driven extra sales on the first and second days that they became available to the public. However, when you roll this limited amount of stock in with some of the other issues that happened, primarily overseas issues, this bit of hype ended up backfiring. And Star Wars The Old Republic actually suffered their very first ever public backlash. Well, okay, maybe not their first ever, but definitely one of the most publicized. And with all the hype leading up to the impending launch of this title, it's getting even more touchy to keep it all in a positive swing. Okay, so what about those international issues? Well, aside from the fact that even people here in the States, where BioWare is located, had trouble getting their hands on a copy of the game before it was sold out, there were actually countries and regions all across the world that flat out could not purchase this game. Either retailers were not shipping to their individual countries, or there were simply no retailers that actually serviced that region and were able to carry the product. Now, BioWare did come out and say that there would be no IP blocking associated with the server connections for Old Republic. So if you are in, let's say, Australia, that were unable to purchase the game, but you managed to get your hands on an American version or a European version of the game, you could still play. But along with this announcement was that there would probably be no localized servers, at least not at the time of launch, meaning that anyone wanting to play from, again, Australia as an example, would be forced to connect to overseas servers. And if any of you have played on an overseas connection, you know that is pain, especially on a launch day when there will be so many people attempting to access that same backbone and same internet pipeline. And then, as if that wasn't enough for you all, there were also retailers around the world that were not issuing pre-order keys to the people that had purchased their copies online. The most notable among these was a UK company called Game, where if you pre-ordered on day one when they became available, you did not receive your pre-order key for several days. Now, usually in an MMO, this is no big deal. Getting your pre-order key is really just a have it before launch sort of thing, and you're good to go. Unfortunately, BioWare has announced that they're going to be using a tiered release schedule. Now, details are sketchy at this time, but it has been said that people that purchase the game will be let in on a first-come, first-served basis based on when they registered their pre-order key on the Knights of the Old Republic's website. Meaning that those people that bought the game on the very first day, although they were the first to spend their money on this well-hyped title that they are going to love playing, they may not be among the first allowed to play it because the retailers did not send them the necessary information in a timely manner. All of these factors, the unavailability of the unit in certain regions, the delay on getting the information out through certain retailers, and the limited availability of stock as a whole, all of this is only made worse by the fact that we're getting very little information about what is going on. Even now, 5 days after pre-orders have started, all we've started to hear is a few notes from BioWare devs saying basically everything's going to be okay. Truth of the matter is, this is not something that they have any say in. These matters are completely beyond BioWare's control. This is an EA issue. This is a publisher issue. The distribution of retail units, of pre-order keys, even the box cost itself, all of this is the kind of thing that's controlled at the publisher level and is way above the pay grade of the people working hard to develop the game that you want to play. And in my opinion, it fuels a very large, very real concern about the game's future in general. You see, the launch of the Old Republic could potentially be the largest MMO launch in the history of the industry, ever. A lot of people forget that even though WoW has reportedly 11 million players in it right now, it wasn't that big on launch day. Neither were Age of Conan or Rift or Warhammer. None of these. Even though they had massive populations on day one, none of them stand up to the amount of boxes that have already been sold, which unconfirmed sources say has already exceeded the 2 to 3 million mark. That means millions of day one people trying to download, patch, and connect to the servers all at the same time. Now, why is this a concern? Because EA and BioWare are not MMO companies. Not yet. And despite being able to learn a great deal by just watching and learning secondhand, nothing really beats hands-on experience. And I think this pre-order fiasco actually nails that point home. It's a good example of exactly what I'm talking about. And it worries me. And not because I'm a fan of Star Wars or because I want to see this game succeed, but because this game is already being referred to in very real ways as the next big thing in the MMO gaming industry. And I don't mean in the same way that Age of Conan or Rift were. That was different. This time, it very well could be real. We've got the professional reputations of a highly reputable gaming company on the line, as well as massive, huge budgets and incredible innovations for the industry as a whole that are as yet unproven. If anything mars the launch of this particular title, it could add a blotch, not just on Star Wars The Old Republic, but on the industry as a whole. You see, sadly, this entire industry has gained itself the reputation of being able to tolerate the launch of unfinished, buggy, unplayable messes. It started at the very birth of the MMO industry itself, and it has continued to get worse. With every majorly hyped title that comes out on this market, we see once more that day one is unplayable, with very few exceptions. And the more hype that precedes those games, the more keenly those disappointments are felt. And the louder they resonate across the entire gaming industry and communities around the world. And let's face it, there really has never been an MMO with this amount of hype steamrolling it forward. So for the Old Republic, every single speed bump, every unexplained outage, every glitch, every bug, every lag spike, and every unbalanced I win button is going to be felt even worse. Not just for the game itself, but it will continue to nail home that same old reputation of the MMO industry tolerating failure. And even though the complaints about those particular features would initially begin within the Old Republic communities themselves, they would eventually spill over out into the rest of MMO gaming, out into general gaming beyond that, and maybe even further, based solely on the sheer volume of the amount of people that are involved in this situation. I mean, we're all in this industry together, and I don't think that EA or BioWare really grasp that because they're not an MMO company. Not yet. And there will be issues. I don't care how phenomenal BioWare's internal QA team is, simply nothing can prepare you for tens or hundreds of thousands of people or more, all hammering on your servers at the same time from locations spread around the entire globe. I'm talking about server instability, zone instability, and little glitches in the code that might only crop up when you have a million people try to click on the same thing at the same time. But what can you do, right? I mean, at this point, is there any solution? Sadly, I don't really see one. Because as I said earlier, TOR has already really broken the hype barrier. It's become a beast completely with a life of its own. And nothing at this point can reduce the fevered pitch of anticipation that's surrounding the impending launch of this title. Which, by the way, we do have confirmation as of this morning will be announced at some point in September. Now, also starting in September, the Old Republic is going to start undergoing beta test weekends. I hope, with all of my heart, that these beta test weekends are aimed firmly at the process of stress testing, where they invite as many people as possible to hammer their servers to death. They have really got to run those servers through the ringers, weed out anything that could potentially mar the launch of this title, and not just for their own sake, but for all of our sakes. Because the MMO community as a whole surrounds us, it penetrates us, and binds us all together. And they will be with us. Always. So to BioWare, and on behalf of the entire MMO community, I only have one more thing to say. Do or do not. There is no try. And believe it or not, that's pretty much all that came out of San Diego Comic-Con this year in terms of MMO gaming. Sure, there's plenty of television and movie stuff to talk about. Oh boy, is there a lot. In fact, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I would encourage you to stop by and watch Jupiter at Night, which is filmed and released on Thursday evenings. I'm usually in it. Before I sign off for the day, I would like to share with you a little bit of news that's kind of a follow-up to something that we had talked about previously on an episode of The Morgue. I had brought up the fact that Take-Two Interactive, 2K Games, and XL Games had formed a partnership to create an MMO out of one of the existing IPs from Take-Two Interactive. Well, we have finally received an announcement on just what IP will be used. XL Games came out and announced Civilization Online. I think I just stopped caring. Might have died a little. Okay, I should be much more interested than I am in this particular title. I mean, having more strategy games enter the MMO landscape sounds like a neat thing, and this show is all about innovation and evolution. So continuing to build on a brand new type of gameplay should be something exciting, especially when you're talking about such a well-established IP as Civilization, the cornerstone of strategy games, right? I've just been so underwhelmed with the offerings that the MMO industry currently has in the strategy market. If you guys watched my review of Age of Empires online, it pretty much came out as a meh, and I'm hearing reviews for End of Nations vary anywhere from yawn to barf. Really, nobody seems excited about this. And to be honest, and I'll give it a little bit of time before I make a final determination, but I just don't know that a subgenre of strategy games, whether real-time or turn-based, is really suitable for the MMO landscape. So, color me just a little bit skeptical. Of course, it doesn't help that Civ 5 was such a drastic step backwards from the epicness of Civ 4. I'm not sure that even the visionary behind Lineage and Arcade can actually turn this around. Now, one more quick plug before I let you all go. Remember that we do have a link in the show notes to my awesome t-shirts, and you can go and pick up through our affiliate links, which gives us a few pennies back in our coffers to keep these shows going. That's all I have for this week's Morgue. So until next time, everybody, play smart. But you don't have to take my word for it. Ba-dum-bum.